What does an ancient feast involving trumpets actually have to do with Christians living in the 21st century America? I think it's more than you might actually think. The Feast of Trumpets, often called Yom Teruah, is found in Leviticus 23 through 25, and God says,
Welcome to the HHP Podcast. My name is Chris Franke, and I am the senior pastor of HFF.church in Oklahoma City. Join me and others from around the country as we talk all things Bible, church, and family. We may be right, we may be heretical, but that's for you to decide. Drop a like, a share, a comment, subscribe, and let's get to it.
On the first day of the seventh month, you were to have a day of Sabbath rest, a sacred assembly, and commemorate with trumpet blast. Interesting, scripture gives us very little explanation about what Israel was actually supposed to celebrate and commemorate. Passover had a story, Unleavened Bread had a story, Pentecost had agricultural and covenant significance, Tabernacles remembered when Israel was dwelling in temporary shelters, but Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, God essentially says, stop, gather, rest, sound a trumpet. That should get our attention, because throughout Scripture, the trumpet is rarely used as some sort of background noise. Trumpets will announce the presence of God. Trumpets would call people to assemble. Trumpets would warn of danger. They would announce kings. They would prepare people for battle. And trumpets signaled that something significant was about to happen. Now, I understand if you're listening to this and you have a background, I understand that it was most likely a shofar, and we do have shofars still available today. But that's a little bit beside the point. At Mount Sinai, Exodus 19 describes that the sound of a shofar, a trumpet, was growing louder and louder as God descended upon the mountain. A trumpet had announced that the king was here. And the theme doesn't disappear in the Gospels. It intensifies that it is Jesus. In 1 Thessalonians 4:16, for the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet call of God. Notice this imagery, that the return of Jesus is accompanied by a trumpet blast. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:51 through 52, we will all be changed in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. At the trumpet, a resurrection will happen. Morality will give way to immortality. The dead are raised, and the people of God are transformed. That means Yom Teruah gives us a biblical picture of something Christians have proclaimed for over 2,000 years. Jesus came once, and Jesus is coming again. The first coming of Jesus was the fulfillment of the work of the redemption. Jesus as our Passover lamb. 1 Corinthians 5:7 says, Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. His death and resurrection opened the way to forgiveness. It opened the way to new life and reconciliation. But the biblical story isn't finished at the resurrection. Jesus then ascends and he reigns. And the scripture says that Jesus will return. That's where the imagery of these trumpets become incredibly powerful for us. Yom Teruah reminds us of the history is actually moving towards something in the future. Christianity is not simply about going to heaven when you die. It's about the return of a king. It's about the resurrection of the dead and the restoration of all creation and the reign of Jesus as Messiah. So does that mean that Christians are required to observe Yom Teruah in order to be saved? Absolutely not. We're saved by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. Yet our righteousness does not come from keeping a feast correctly, but there is some massive difference between saying, I don't have to do this to be saved, and saying that this has nothing to teach me. That would be foolish to say that I cannot learn something from something that God literally gave us to learn. Paul says in Colossians 2:16 through 17, that the biblical festivals are shadows of things that will come, while the substance belongs to Christ. A shadow isn't worthless. A shadow tells us that something is coming. And this feast points beyond us and points directly towards a king, and that king is Jesus.
If this podcast has blessed you, please consider supporting by visiting our website and making a donation. For more resources, blogs, podcasts, please visit us at HFF.church. Looking for a church home? Join us for Saturday Church in OKC every Saturday morning, starting at 10:30.
Got questions, if you got doubts, if your faith survived the fire and you're still working it